Where do diseases come from? Why do people get sick? From themselves and their actions. Diseases come from lack of knowledge on how to do things correctly. That means that diseases come from degradation. We don't know how to behave, there's no knowledge, and because of this, illness occurs. What is knowledge? Knowledge is what we realize, what we understand. If we read something in a newspaper, that's not knowledge. Those are just facts. But knowledge is what we have realized within ourselves, what we have understood to be definitely true and not otherwise. We understood this through examples from our own lives, through examples of our own behavior, so it has penetrated inside somehow. To be more precise, knowledge is when some information directly contacts the heart. A person's mind is in the heart, and intelligence is in the heart also. If information just spins around in the head, it doesn't get into the very heart. This means it doesn't reach us deeply. It depends on the significance of the information. Significance varies for us. Some things we are not interested in. The more interesting the information is to us, the deeper it penetrates the heart. But special grace is needed. If a person lives honestly, correctly, they realize more than one who lives incorrectly. Because the heart becomes polluted by bad, incorrect actions, and knowledge becomes clouded by anger and passion. Therefore, a person loses knowledge as a result of not acting as they should. We talked about this in the previous lecture. We discussed it in more detail. Now we will discuss this topic with you. Diseases arise as a result of our actions. There is no other reason. The ecological situation that we have now, and the ecological situation of our thoughts. You know, the ecological state of thoughts now kills more people than poisoned air and food, many hundreds of times more. Therefore, we may not even look at this poisoned food as the cause of our illnesses. It's a completely secondary reason. If we simply take the concept that thoughts have a subtle material nature, and think of a large house, it has many apartments, there are many people in them, and the mood of each of them depends on all those around. Do you know about this? That your neighbors affect your mental state every minute, depending on who lives next to us. In the next room or apartment, our consciousness will change. But all this is not by chance. All this is not by chance. Our environment arises as a result of our past actions, actions of our past lives or in this life. In previous lectures, we discussed an example when a child becomes ill from birth because they behaved badly in a past life. That means that diseases in a person arise from ignorant actions, and they pay for them later. And who can say that they know how to act correctly? Raise your hand. Only a child raised their hand, the rest don't know. So if someone thinks they know how to behave properly, it is really only holy people who know how to behave properly. A person with an absolutely pure heart can understand how to act correctly. They truly know how to do things right. But a person who studies the scriptures, the Vedas, for example, can simply know on a mental level how to do things correctly. But if they have already advanced in spiritual knowledge, they already know in their heart, they have understanding, they have gained awareness of what is right. A person can somehow protect themselves from bad things by studying, even if they have unrealized knowledge, having at least some knowledge. And we will now examine in detail the scheme of how this works. For those who are drawing or writing, unfortunately, I don't have the opportunity to draw for you because I have to speak into the microphone. I'll just show you with my hands now. Draw a circle at the bottom and call it false ego. The very bottom circle, false ego. Then draw a middle circle, mind and senses, above. And at the very top right, intelligence. Draw intelligence. Now we will analyze this together and encircle all of this in a large circle. We are inside this circle, it means myself, inside. Everything surrounding us is outside. Depending on which circle inside predominates, various states arise in a person. There are two main states, one of which creates health for a person and the other creates diseases. Two main states. These states can change several times during the day. So the state is like this. Now we will test you. If a person thinks all evil is inside myself and there is good outside, in what state will they be, sick or healthy? Who thinks they will be in a healthy state? Raise your hand. Who thinks they will be in a sick state? The rest abstained, right? Well, a person who believes that all evil is inside and good is outside, even if they are a little sick, will eventually be cured. It means such a person will be in a healthy state, undoubtedly, but many factors will hinder this state. You will see now, they are already hindering you. You are already indignant. It will hinder even more if you study this further. The state when a person believes that all good is inside them, which is our usual state, and all evil is outside, is a state that inevitably leads to an increase in diseases. Eventually, it leads a person to enormous suffering. Did you draw it? Did everyone sketch these diagrams? Now we will analyze this together. Intelligence always tells a person how to act correctly. Where does it get the information from? Who knows? The mind is weaker. It occupies a lower position. It doesn't know anything at all. It's like a puppet. Intelligence gets information from God. There is a divine power inside us. It shows us what happiness is and what knowledge is. A person who can look inside themselves and see this power of happiness and knowledge is absolutely happy and absolutely healthy. They have no problems with how to act, and in the future they will have no problems either. This power gives an understanding of conscience. What is conscience? It comes from divine power. In the Vedas it's called Paramatma. Paramatma is the oversoul. It's above the soul. The soul is in the area of the heart, and the Paramatma is in the middle here. It exists on the spiritual plane. No instrument can measure its presence. It's not even material energy. It's spiritual energy. It gives the power of happiness, an extraordinary power of happiness. The soul is very small in size, about the size of an atom. When the soul turns its gaze to the Paramatma, to the Oversoul, it is filled with an enormous power of happiness. But this is only possible when a person has gained absolute knowledge, knowledge of God. They already know how to address Him. We will talk about this later. Now you should understand that intelligence can take information from the Oversoul and learn how to act correctly. If a person has an impure heart, has committed many bad deeds, their intelligence is clouded. They won't be able to receive information from the Oversoul, no matter how hard they try. For this purpose, there exists authoritative information. Authoritative information is not the one that's written in newspapers and magazines. It is not people who claim that this is the real truth. Now there are many different schools and spiritual movements open up. How is authoritative information defined? Who knows? Nobody knows. Authoritative information is defined as follows. If someone achieves perfection with the help of this knowledge, and you see this person, then this information is authoritative. If thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people achieve perfection with the help of this knowledge, then it is beyond doubt. Therefore, you should study everything. I have already studied it for myself. You should study very seriously what is authoritative information and what is not authoritative. If you trust everything as you do now, it's simply foolishness. I am asked many questions every day. They are all constructed like this. That's true. I say, where did you get this from? I got it from a very authoritative person. I say, where did he get it from? He discovered it. When the whole logical chain ends there, you can end the conversation. The probability that everything there will be absolute truth is very small. There is knowledge that goes through a chain of succession. This knowledge is reliable. One person passes it to another, and so it goes from God Himself. God is born, incarnates, behaves as a human, and gives this knowledge to people. How does He show that He is God? There is a whole science studying this. It is astrologically confirmed. Planets align in a certain way. All His body parts and measurements are described in the Vedas. When God is born, what His body measurements should be, what patterns should be on His hands and feet, all of this is described. It is described how His face should look, His character traits, His behavior. His life is described, what He will approximately do in general terms. If a person is born and does not possess all these qualities, then they are not gods, but simply impostors. Now many call themselves God. You can look at their astrological chart and it will be clear that this is simply a deception. God was born 5,000 years ago. He was born 500 years ago last time. When He is born, He gives a certain direction to spiritual knowledge. He gave Vedic knowledge 5,000 years ago. Rather, it already existed on earth. He just reminded us of it. You may not trust this. You shouldn't trust anything at face value. We should study everything. I'm now giving you what I study. He also gave information about what the soul is, the oversoul, what intelligence, mind, false ego, and senses are. This is the structure of our subtle energy body. Our happiness and health depend on it. Is this interesting to you or not? Or I'll start making jokes so you don't fall asleep. Jokes will come later. The interaction of these three circles goes on and on. Intelligence tries to control the mind and senses. Senses are the subtle threads connecting us with the surrounding world. Our subtle energy body does not end with the physical body in which we are sitting now. Our senses, like subtle material threads, entangle in everything now. Whatever they come into contact with, they receive either joy or suffering from, depending on what the interaction with this object will be. The senses are connected to the mind. The mind is under the influence of the false ego. The circle of the false ego increases and covers the mind. In this case, the mind is under the influence of the false ego. The senses will only want what the false ego wants. I am going to describe now what the false ego wants, signs that it covers the mind. Now you will look for these signs in yourself. If a person's false ego covers the mind, their senses will inherently work on this principle. Everything that is inside is good, it's true, truth and goodness. Everything that is outside of me could be evil. You should be afraid of such a principle. If such a person has a conflict, they believe that the one who argued with them is to blame. The person whose intelligence covers the mind and senses thinks that circumstances are to blame, the situation itself. I got this kind of conflict because of fate. Of course, it's my own fault for arguing and bickering. I shouldn't have raised my voice at another person, even if they might have been wrong about something. But it's not even my business. If even they were wrong and confronted me about it, I deserved it by fate. I was supposed to receive punishment from this person. This is what my fate dictates. I acted wrongly in the past. As a result, such a situation arose. Then intelligence is higher than the false ego, and there is a constant struggle. A person whose false ego is higher believes that they are right, even if they are wrong. They consider they are at least right about something. Such a person thinks they know quite a lot. They think they know a lot more than others. They always want to argue and defend their point of view. They don't want to listen, they only want to talk. A person whose false ego predominates and covers the mind, when something critical is said to them, they always resent inwardly, at least inwardly. Such a person notices the faults of others very much, but is not inclined to notice their own faults. They also criticize the behavior of other people, criticize the behavior of society. If they see flaws in their own behavior, they think it's not a big deal, it's not as serious as the flaws of other people. Evil is actually all outside, and good is inside. This means that the person will endure terrible suffering in this world. Why? Because if they declared that evil is outside, the false ego overpowered their mind, all senses are imbued with the false ego. The threads that go outside intertwine all objects and appropriate them. A person entwines various objects with their senses and mind, depending on what they like. Let's say a man liked a car in a shop. He connected with this car through his senses. Even though he's on his way home, his feelings are still tied to that car. If someone else buys it, he immediately feels some suffering, although he doesn't know about it yet. When the false ego overpowers the mind, a person always wants something for themselves. They develop a desire to grab. A desire appears because the false ego is focused on having for oneself. It's just an animal feeling. The person thinks, I need more, everything should be for me, I don't want to give, I want to take. I want to earn more money, I want to take more, I want for myself. Those who are against me are my enemies, those who are for me are my friends. Is it a familiar situation? Someone told you, do this and that, you have done wrong, and it was told in a rather rude manner. What does it mean if they said it rudely? It means that we had certain impurity in our heart. We caught that dirt in the other person's voice as they spoke, and it collided with our heart. A force of resistance flared up in our heart. You mentally accuse this person of being wrong. Where does the strength of resistance come from? It's because the false ego has closed off the heart. The mind is in the heart, and feelings originate from there. The mind also channels its power to the head, where we think. We think using nerve cells, but the mind itself is in the heart. You say, my heart skipped a beat, and I understood everything. This means that the mind is in the heart. Nothing skips a beat in the head, only in the heart. This is what the Vedas explain. It's all elaborated there. Therefore, look at how interesting it turns out to be. I didn't like the words. Now you will know all of this. Try to act as you should. It's very hard, almost impossible. You might not even realize you're wrong. I didn't like the words. What flares up instantly? Why are you talking to me like this? And our heart also strikes back at that person. That person flares up. You're pressing on their false ego, and it flares up, blocking their mind. It's fortunate if only the mind is blocked. It can affect intelligence as well. The false ego can block everything completely. Then the person flares up and says, "But you behaved like that." And again it strikes our heart. We look at them and the false ego says, "The injustice coming from this person is enormous." The false ego says, "Why are you speaking to me like that?" The other person flares up and says, "You don't want to listen to me at all. You did act like that." And once again, it's a blow to our heart. We have this flaw. We've already earned all this in the past. This conversation was already planned. And we pass our judgment. We curse. And what is a curse? Do you know what a curse is? It's when we fervently ask God for something bad to happen to someone. We say, "Well, you scoundrel, may something bad happen to you." Internally. Because we're afraid. He is a man after all. In situations when a man speaks to a woman, women can curse more often than men, because they are weaker. But sometimes men curse too. A woman can be mentally stronger than a man. In the end, what happens? A war begins. And for many, it starts almost every day. It's almost impossible to avoid it because they hit the heart. The heart is struck with great force. Wherever we go, there's immediately an external blow. Why? Because we have accumulated so much negativity. For every minute of our life, it's already planned that we will be mocked. Because we did the same thing before. Can you imagine what a tough fate this is? And where is happiness here? Happiness lies in self-awareness. When a person realizes that someone mentally burdened them only because they themselves did so before, the resentment vanishes instantly. This is the situation. What does a person suffer from? Not from the conflict itself. The conflict itself just causes fatigue. The resentment comes from a sense of injustice. It suffocates a person and burns them to the ground. That's the essence. All diseases stem from this, or almost all diseases. Even poor nutrition and nutritional disorders are connected to this. Oversleeping and disruption of work habits, it's all tied to how we treat others around us badly. Bad attitude is only possible when a person had a fairly clean fate in the past. But if a person is armed with knowledge, with a strong intelligence, then they can overcome and take control of their mind. Then they can correctly assess the situation, not to take offense or become disappointed. So let's continue analyzing the false ego. The false ego has saturated the mind and feelings with its power. A person lives in a consumer state thinking, "My wife treats me badly. My husband treats me badly. They don't fulfill their duties towards me. They don't fulfill their responsibilities to me. The husband doesn't bring enough money and spends too much time with his friends, not with me, more than he should. The wife doesn't cook well. She doesn't take care of me. She only thinks about herself. She spends the whole day putting on makeup, only caring for herself, and doesn't do any laundry for me. I work like a pig, like a donkey. I come home and she's still nagging me here." This is the state when the false ego overpowers the mind. The feelings are filled with the desire to profit, to exploit the other person who is next to me. In this state, a person perceives everyone around them as someone who should serve them. In such a state, a person experiences the most terrible suffering. You all know this, the most terrible suffering. It becomes constantly very hard to live, very bad. Everything irritates, makes you angry, and it's just very hard. The mind is connected to feelings. We've briefly analyzed the false ego. Now we're analyzing the mind. The mind is connected with feelings. It's a puppet of whoever dominates it. It has nothing of its own. The mind is very changeable. Therefore, a person's thoughts depend on the circumstances. For example, if a child gets a poor grade, the teacher is bad. If the child gets a good grade, the teacher is good. You all know this. If the salary is paid on time, the boss is good. If the salary is delayed, the boss is bad. If there's order in the country, the president is good. If there's chaos in the country, the president is bad, naturally. But in reality, order or chaos in the country depends on our fate. We end up living in the place where we're supposed to be. Every place has its own power and its own fate. Many people share a common fate, and each city has its own fate. When we travel to different cities, we observe. We see that this city has one kind of fate, while that city has another. One city might have a certain kind of suffering, and another city has a different type. In one country there are certain sufferings. In another, different ones. In one place there are certain types of people, in another, different types. Everything holds its own significance. In your Omsk, there are also certain characteristics. People are simpler. There is such a fate to be close to each other. There are many people who are in a state of degradation. They drink a lot, engage in robbery, violence. They have such a fate. But these sufferings also purify people. Therefore, people are simpler and more inclined to listen, more trusting. At the same time, it's not a very good quality to be trustful. We should not trust, but study everything. We need to study everything. We shouldn't be trusting everything. In principle, consciousness is purified as a result of suffering. There's quite a lot of suffering in Omsk. I see it around me. There's a lot of suffering on your faces. Many of you have a feeling of hopelessness. This force is present in the city. It's different across Russia. For example, in Saratov, there's a different force. People there are not in such a strong state of hopelessness as you are. But they have more irritability. There's a greater propensity for drug abuse there, and so on. That is, each city has its own peculiarities. In Moscow, there's more passion. Everyone is running around like crazy, deceiving each other, pulling off financial schemes. Each city has its own fate. In general, Russia's fate is not very favorable. It's calmer there, but there are many people who consider themselves very smart, almost everyone. You should understand that each city has its own fate. This comes from the rule that what we've earned, that is where we end up. So don't complain that you have it worse. Each person ends up in the most favorable conditions for their life. Because by meeting these conditions, one can understand everything necessary and attain happiness in the next life. If someone achieves success in life, they gain an understanding of everything they need to know. A person can comprehend everything around them, including why they have a certain spouse or certain children. A person understands how to work and what the purpose of life is. They heal and find happiness, along with all the blessings that exist. All of this happens naturally, depending on our actions. There's no need to chase wealth. One should become hardworking and honest towards others. Being hardworking means loving work, not merely working extremely hard or excessively. A person who truly loves work doesn't think about how much they will earn. They think about the beauty that will result from what they do and how it will benefit others. Such a person will always have enough money for life. This is a law which is very difficult to understand, but it exists. We should study all this. It's a science. Let's not get distracted and move on. The mind is influenced by the senses and can also be influenced by intelligence or false ego, depending on which one prevails. The senses can provide both positive and negative power. When intelligence overpowers the senses and the mind, it awakens a desire to understand. Like now, as you sit with a desire to know, the intelligence prevails over the mind and senses. You control your false ego this way. The understanding that evil resides within and we must overcome it while the good lies outside. What comes from outside helps us understand what our problem is. If something happened, it reflects a similar issue from the past. If another thing happened, it means I had that. Everything that comes from the outside is a lesson. God teaches us this way, what specific mistakes we shouldn't make in the future to avoid getting into a particular situation again. Everything outside of us is good. The mind always thinks depending on the influence it is under. Understanding this is profound knowledge. It's very difficult to grasp that the mind is changeable as a sailboat. Wherever the wind blows, that's where it sails. The sailor might believe each time that he's sailing where he needs to. That's exactly what happens. The wind drives the senses, and the sailor represents the mind. The mind is like a sailor in the boat of senses, always thinking, wherever the wind blows, that's where we need to sail. This is its nature. The compass represents intelligence. It guides us. We need to sail in this direction. There's land and happiness ahead. Sail that way. And the false ego says, don't listen. Sail wherever you want. The truth is within me. I know and understand everything. I want it this way, so I'll do it this way. Is it clear how this works? So the mind thinks depending on the situation. Now we'll talk about how these three interact with each other. They interact like this. Imagine I'm sleeping. The day before yesterday, I heard a lecture about the importance of getting up on time. Now, as I'm sleeping and the alarm goes off early in the morning at 6 o'clock, intelligence says, do you remember the lecture? I say, yes, so what? Your blood pressure will be low all day. You'll be gulping down coffee again. But I went to bed late last night. Then I need to sleep. Definitely I need to sleep. That's it. The struggle is over. The second option is when intelligence says the next evening, go to bed on time, otherwise you'll be telling me the same thing again. It says, okay, fine, I'll go to bed on time, let's see what happens. The mind, influenced by the false ego, says to intelligence, you won't defeat me. The false ego says, I'll do what I want anyway. I don't care about this doctor or the recommendations. Let my head hurt and my blood pressure be low. Intelligence says, listen, then you'll be suffering all your life. Do you want to suffer? Eventually, intelligence prevails and the man goes to bed on time. However, even after going to bed on time, he still doesn't want to get up in the morning. At that point, the mind is under the influence of the senses. And what are the senses connected with? With the bed. They lie there and the body is relaxed. The senses are connected to the relaxed body. The relaxed body says, it's good. It is so nice to lie here. This is the best thing ever. Just lie here and don't think about anything. Intelligence responds, but we need to check. The doctor says life will improve if I get up on time. The senses argue, but you're tired. You didn't sleep much. The mind, under the influence of the senses, always finds excuses. The senses are connected to the body, which is relaxed, and the mind begins working in this direction. It composes, invents, creates a situation by itself. The mind says, but you're tired. Intelligence says, but you've slept as much as you need. What else do you need? You've already slept enough. You need to get up. Your head is already fresh. You've had enough sleep. Get up. Then the mind starts to think and comes up with illogical arguments. Well, just a little bit longer. From this argument, intelligence shuts down for 5 minutes and sleep takes over. The man wakes up a little later and thinks, what happened? He realizes he dozed off. I need to focus, he tells himself. He focuses and thinks, well, I've already overslept by half an hour, so there's no point in trying now. I might as well keep sleeping. That's how the mind reasons. He turns to the other side and thinks, well, thank God, and falls asleep. Then again, blood pressure is low all day. In the evening, he goes to bed on time thinking, I'll definitely get up no matter what. Nothing can stop me. He wakes up at the set time, gets out of bed thinking, am I really getting up? Everyone is sleeping, and here I am getting up. He looks at his wife, who is still sleeping. The mind observes, the others are sleeping. Am I any worse? Intelligence says, well, get up and walk a little, do something. The person thinks, okay, I'll get up today, but we'll see about tomorrow. That's how the mind thinks. He gets up and walks, and the mind constantly says, why did you get up so early? Constantly hammering at intelligence. The person feels weak because of all this. He doesn't feel weak because he didn't get enough sleep, but because of the mind's influence. The senses connect with the feeling of sleepiness, tuning into the sleepy state of others who are still asleep, and sleep begins to envelop the person. How to overcome this state? You need to go straight to the shower. When a person stands under the shower, the senses' enveloping power shifts from the warmth of the bed to the coolness of water. The senses are connected to the warmth of the bed, causing the person to feel weak and want to go back to sleep. But when a person stands under the shower, he says, wait, I'll get under the shower now. We'll figure it out there. He gets under the shower, and suddenly the sleepiness is gone, but only for a while, until the person starts envying those who are sleeping again. If someone strongly envies those who are sleeping, it's better not to go to the bedroom at all. You need to focus on doing something at this time. In the morning, you should engage in the most interesting activity. You need to set aside everything else and prioritize this. It's generally recommended to read spiritual books, to gain the power of happiness. Engage with uplifting, positive content. Read the lives of saints or other similar readings. I read the Vedas every morning. People pray in the mornings or take a moment to sit and wish happiness to everyone. You should sit for 5 minutes after waking up, not to do exercises. Just sit and read a prayer aloud, softly enough not to wake anyone up. Some people start yelling angrily, and the husband wakes up thinking, she's bothering me with this happiness thing again. My patients constantly tell me such examples. They say, I wish everyone happiness in the morning, but my husband gets angry. And I ask, how do you wish it? She says, loudly, as you told us to. But you need to wish happiness quietly, in a whisper, so that nobody wakes up. Sit somewhere in the kitchen and wish everyone happiness for about 15 minutes. The power of goodness will penetrate your heart, and you'll want to do something. Then you'll wake up. When a person consistently does this every day, they develop a taste for waking up early, and they acquire the power of the morning. The power of the morning is the power of immense optimism. A person who wakes up early in the morning is filled with this power, like nectar. They want to get up early in the morning, and their life becomes happy. Morning is like early youth, when a person experiences a lot of happiness. Children laugh very joyfully. They are sincere. Day is similar to adolescence and young adulthood, and evening resembles maturity and old age. Late evening time is like old age, and night is like death. When a person always wakes up early in the morning, their childhood becomes very happy. They are born in the next life and receive a very happy childhood. They create very favorable conditions for life. Check it for yourself. If you're used to waking up late, it means you also woke up late in your past life. It means your childhood wasn't very good. And if you wake up early, it means your childhood was filled with joy. This power of joy in childhood fills a person with joy and optimism for their entire life. Similarly, when a person gets enough joy in the morning, they live the whole day in optimism. What is optimism? It's the power that makes the intelligence say, "Everything will be fine, don't worry." It's the power of sobering up. The power of optimism is the power of sobering up. When is intelligence able to sober a person up? When the power of happiness coming from God is strong within a person. And then the intelligence can say, "Don't worry, everything will be fine. Don't pay any attention to all this, whatever events may occur." And such a person is confident that everything will be fine. And they reinforce their confidence with knowledge. They study and they say, "This is it. I understood. This is how it should be done, and then it will be good." An optimist always strives to do things right. They always say, "This is how I will do it." And they already plan for themselves how to do it. And they achieve success. They try to do it this way. A pessimist who has bad fate has many bad events piled up on them. They can't handle them. They don't want to work. In principle, a pessimist is a person whose feelings are imbued with laziness. The body overpowers, the false ego overpowers the intelligence. Such a person is not capable of being optimistic. They say, "Everything is evil outside anyway. Everything is bad. The dollar is rising. Things are getting worse at work. Everyone is grumbling. The food is bad. The country is bad. The city is bad. The winter is cold. So it's better to shoot yourself than to live. But we have to raise children." That's how they think. But when optimism prevails, then a person thinks, "I need to gain more knowledge and study. And when I learn, I do things right, and life becomes easier for me." When a person acts correctly, they find happiness. When intelligence overpowers the mind, the feelings are temporarily purified, and the feelings begin to gravitate towards what brings happiness. When the false ego overpowers, and the mind is imbued with false ego, and the feelings are imbued with it, they try to grasp all material things. The feelings try to grab more money to have abundance. The feelings start to grasp material things. The false ego says, "This is for me, that is for me." When intelligence permeates, then a person feels that happiness lies in doing good for someone else. Then the person is filled with the power of service to others. Not serving oneself, not inward, but outward. When intelligence prevails, a condition emerges. I want to do something for others selflessly. I just want to do something for others. When was the last time you felt so? Please try to recall. Is it difficult? When intelligence prevails, completely selflessly, right? Completely selflessly, just to do something for others. Why? Because a person sees happiness in this. That is, they see happiness in service. They are already striving for the spiritual. They want all people to be happy. They want to study divine knowledge. They want all the best things. They want everyone to be well, despite the fact that people have flaws. Why do people have flaws? Because they committed bad deeds in the past, but they need help. And the following happens. Intelligence tells a person, "Do this, do that," and life becomes interesting. You're constantly learning how to do things right. You wish happiness to everyone, you try to improve the situation, and people gradually begin to see such a person as an object of their love. They feel, "This person is good. He constantly takes care of me, always greets me and says good words. He does what he commits to, and if he is wrong, he admits it. Maybe not immediately, but he admits it. Therefore, I will do something good for this person. And such a person is already surrounded by benevolent people. A person whose intelligence prevails thinks, why should I argue with everyone and pull everything towards myself? I'm tired of all this. I've been doing this for so long, all my life. It doesn't bring any happiness. You keep rowing and still everything is bad and falling apart. You have saved up money and then spent it where you shouldn't have. This always happens. It's a pattern. When a person wants to do something for others, wants to wish happiness to everyone, wants to do something good for other people, they imbue everyone with this power of happiness. It emanates from them and touches other people on a subtle level. And gradually, like an iceberg melts, people's bad opinion about us melts away, very slowly but inexorably. And gradually they respect us more and more. They begin to treat us as a reasonable person, not as a person who is under the influence of false ego. He desires things for himself, and people fear such a person. Often this is what happens. Everyone in the family is afraid of each other. They fear approaching or saying an extra word, even a child to a mother or a mother to a child. Everyone is under the influence of false ego. But when in a family at least one person, and you should start with yourself, when at least one person is under the influence of intelligence, gradually all family members gravitate towards them, because every family member finds solace in them. But such a person should always stand very firmly on their principle, even if they are treated badly, even if they argue with others. They must always apologize afterwards and say, I was wrong. And they do this only because they understand that in fact everything happens as a lesson for me. I must understand the situation. When I apologize, then self-awareness will come to me. After this, I will understand what I really need to do in life. Such a person does not blame other people. They realize that others act wrongly. They also know that these people will in any case suffer as a result. What's the point in blaming them? Nature will punish them anyway. Therefore we shouldn't, but we pretend when we fall under the influence of the false ego to wish well. What is true benevolence and what is false benevolence? We'll now examine this with you. True benevolence is when a person, by changing themselves, changes other people. When one begins to serve others and focuses on improving oneself rather than trying to correct others, this is true benevolence. Because they know that if I react negatively to others, how can I correct them? They simply won't listen to or respect me. I must start with myself and become a good person. True benevolence is when a person takes responsibility for their own faults and works to correct themselves with optimism. Simply feeling at fault and saying, everything is bad and I'm to blame for everything, is not benevolence. True benevolence is when a person acknowledges their fault with full optimism and takes actions to correct everything. Remember this formula. True benevolence is when a person starts to change everything from themselves. False benevolence is when a person thinks, first I will change others, and then I will deal with myself. Someone with false benevolence constantly tries to teach and correct everyone else. They say, you're doing badly, you're doing badly, you're doing badly. This is false benevolence. They teach and command everyone but don't correct themselves in the process. You have the right to command others only if it's your duty to do so, and you are actively changing yourself in the process. If you're a boss at work, you should of course lead, but at the same time, you must focus on changing yourself first and foremost. Do you agree with me or not? If a person is a boss but does not change themselves, what happens? Then people won't respect or obey them, because nothing will change anyway. Therefore, this is false benevolence because it doesn't lead to a positive outcome. In the end, what does such a person actually achieve? He constantly clashes with people, bad energy accumulates in his body, and because the mind is connected to all internal organs, it fills all internal organs with these negative feelings. What happens as a result? Illness. Then people call me on the phone. Whoever managed to get through today, raise your hand. You managed to get through, and who else called? Not too many. But I did tell you about what caused the illness, didn't I? Do you agree with that? The point is that the main cause of illness is usually linked to the person's mental state, specifically their outlook and overall attitude towards life. An inexorable thread leads them to a certain illness gradually. Depending on a person's direction in life, an illness develops. Like an inexorable force, it causes a person to fall ill, and nothing can be done about it. Suffering inevitably follows. I've witnessed such suffering caused by a single bad habit. Just one bad habit or one misguided perspective is enough. For example, my husband's attitude towards me is unfair. Just that. One thought, and that's it. It can kill a person. Completely take them out of a state of health and happiness and destroy their entire existence. Just one such thought. They treat me unfairly at work. That's all. One such thought gradually destroys a person. I have a bad apartment. I have bad children. I have rude children. One such thought is enough to gradually destroy a person. I'm now describing the main negative thoughts that occur most often. What are they generally related to? They usually emerge in relation to what we are most attached to. We are attached to children, our work, our apartment. And if we think negatively about any or all of this, believing that God hasn't given us what we need, then the most serious illnesses immediately follow. Thus, what we are most attached to and love the most becomes the source of danger if we have the wrong attitude towards it. Therefore, we should wish happiness to God for providing us a good apartment, even if it's small, even if it leaks from the ceiling due to neighbors, even if drunk neighbors make noise every day. Some people have no home and live on the streets. Are you aware of this? No? So it's all right. God gave a more or less decent apartment, a one-room place with a small kitchen and no hot water. It doesn't matter. It's important to understand that when a person thinks this way, they are balanced. They don't want anything. Don't think that wanting more will get you more. This is a misconception. We will have exactly as much as we deserved from our past life, according to our fate. The amount we receive is directly tied to the amount of virtuous deeds. Not as much as we want. We might desire a palace. Does that mean we'll have one? Not at all. But if we strongly desire it, in the next life God gives us a palace, and we die from the unhappiness it brings. Why? Because a palace requires constant care and attention. You have to look after it, manage all these people, and maintain the estate, turning yourself into a servant to your servants and this entire palace. People end up running around like crazy. In India, I have seen people who have big houses, and it's a complete nightmare. Imagine spending your entire day running around just to maintain all this household. Otherwise, at the slightest opportunity, when you let your guard down even for a moment, some servant is already stealing something, and everything goes downhill. Everyone is looking out for themselves. Everyone's tentacles are working for their own benefit. So it's very difficult. Therefore, don't ask God for anything extra. It's unnecessary. Let things be as they are, your children as they are, your husband as he is. God forbid something changes. It will be 100% worse. So don't ask for anything. Everything is good as it is. To have good relationships with others, what should you do? If you're listening to the lecture carefully, you may already have an idea. Develop intelligence. Wishing others happiness won't work if false ego prevails. It will say, here's happiness for you. It will say, I will wish them happiness and you will have happiness. I will change this formula of Dr. Torsunov. I wish everyone happiness. I wish everyone happiness except you. When false ego prevails, it will say so. Many of my patients told me they do it this way because they fail to do it differently. You should understand that you need to cultivate knowledge. You need to increase the power of intelligence. Your intelligence must become an enormous force. It should become so strong as to say, you know what will come of this. You know that if you get offended, you will suffer health issues, whether it's your heart or your pancreas, or your small intestine, or the left side of your thyroid gland will fail. Depending on the nature of the offense, a particular organ suffers. So why be offended then? The mind sobers up, and the false ego diminishes. The mind says, well, all right, that's it. I'm not offended. Everything is fine. Then the false ego flares up, and the mind questions, how can I not be offended with a husband like this? Intelligence responds, this is just your past fate. You shouldn't have acted like that in your past life. You were probably a husband yourself in your past life. You tortured your wife. Now you want a good husband. It won't work. And the mind says, well, okay, but he acts like this and I act like that. The false ego keeps flaring up, and intelligence continues pressing. Intelligence persists. He behaves this way because you acted this way in your past life or in this one. Therefore, intelligence must be very strong and well informed. And what's the mind's last argument? It is, this Dr. Torsunov made it all up. And immediately a false sense of calmness sets in. It starts to feel good. The false ego has won, and the mind says to intelligence, You're always so foolish. You listen to everyone. Intelligence then feels guilty and says, I won't go anywhere anymore. I won't attend any lectures. I'll stay home. Everything will be fine with me then. I simply don't have time to go. I have no time. I have to work. Why go to all these lectures? Why listen? There's no time for these lectures. Who determines how much time should be spent on what? For instance, people always find time to eat. Are there people who haven't eaten? Let's say a person is working and then it's time to eat. Are there people who refuse to eat every day or don't eat at all for weeks? One can refuse now but will eat later. Remember, it's not only the stomach that wants to eat. You should write down this phrase. It's not only the stomach that wants to eat. Why should everything be written down? I'll explain to you now. Because the false ego has a quality to cloud memory. Memory of knowledge is an associate of intelligence. Does intelligence possess memory or not? If a person has a weak memory, it's a curse. You need to write everything down and constantly read what you heard at the lecture. Because when memory is poor, the false ego clouds memory. And the false ego says, what did you hear at the lecture? You don't even remember clearly anymore what he said there. And that's it. Immediately everything is forgotten and you start acting as you acted before. This is the battle of intelligence against the false ego. If reason wins, after death, a person goes to higher planets or to heaven, or even the spiritual world, if they have begun to serve God, then they are freed from all this suffering and from this learning. A person in principle needs to learn and understand their nature. They need to learn to be happy, and happiness comes from the Oversoul, which is within us. When a person focuses their mind and attention on the Oversoul, they become peaceful. Nothing external bothers them, and such a person leads a holy life. He receives as much as comes to him, and it's brought by people interested in him. They come to him with food and ask, tell us the truth. He tells them the truth and feeds on this. Thus such a person can live, he needs nothing more. Those who attain true knowledge, such as sages, saints, and hermits, live this way. This has always existed, even in Russia. When Seraphim of Sarov looked at people, he radiated a light of happiness. It was enough for people to look at him to understand everything. Many pilgrims would come, look at him, and instantly be filled with the power of knowledge. Nothing more was needed. Occasionally such saints are born. In India, there are still many such saints today. If you have a chance, visit India and see for yourself. There are many temples and priests, and many of them possess great knowledge. We attribute everything to the fact that everything happens from within us, all events. That is, we immediately set our own measures, thinking that everyone will be like us depending on how we are. In reality, everything is controlled. Who is born and where is determined by fate. A person is born depending on their fate. On this earth, there will be a certain number of saints and a certain number of those who suffer in one way or another. There will be no one else here. If a person is better, they are born elsewhere. If they have exhausted their bad fate, they move to another place to live. This doesn't mean that life is better in America. In fact, people there have even worse fate. There's more arrogance, depravity, and violence than here. So there is no point in going there. It's better to finish everything here. Thus, the whole world will not be filled with holy people. Don't worry, it's impossible. The earth would become a higher planet if it happens. It's impossible. Earth is in its place and serves a specific purpose. Therefore, there's no point in engaging in politics. To say, we will destroy everything to the ground, and those who were nothing will become everything, is foolishness. What kind of approach is this? To think that I will teach others first, then change myself. The approach is to start with the other, and then a person takes a gun in their hands and says, he can't be fixed anymore. A civil war begins. Some are white, some are red. This causes suffering. It comes from the belief that evil is external. The president is bad. The salespeople are bad. These are bad. These are good. The one who is rich is bad. The one who is poor is good. For the rich, all the poor are bad, and the rich are good. Enmity arises. It will always be present in those people who direct their consciousness outward. Do you understand this?
What does it mean to forgive?
To forgive, that's a very good question. What does it mean to forgive? Forgiveness means understanding. We often focus on the emotional aspect of forgiveness, saying, I forgave you, but we may not truly forgive, and a heavy feeling remains in our heart. If a burden remains in the heart, it will weigh on the person, preventing good relationships. When a person has a very strong intelligence, they understand all things as they truly are. Where did they study this? In the scriptures. They studied what is written about this. I read it. This is how it should be. They must find an authoritative source for themselves. This is how intelligence develops and becomes strong, like a rock. Because if the heart is impure, a person will not find truth through their inner understanding alone. Because the false ego always claims to be a spiritual teacher and says, this is how it should be done. This is the truth. I am your spiritual teacher, I'm telling you. This ego-driven voice can even encourage us to indulge in excesses, like overeating. It tells me, go and overeat. So I went and overate. The false ego becomes a spiritual guide if one thinks that knowledge comes from within. At this point, we cannot gain knowledge from within. Knowledge comes from outside. We need to find an authoritative source, find people who truly understand everything, and study all of this. Only then will understanding come from within, once the heart has been purified over many years. What is forgiveness? Forgiveness is realizing that they are not better than the person who wronged you. This is true forgiveness. I am not better than this person. Why hold a grudge? Did you think it meant something else? I am not better, therefore I forgave. I am not better than this person, therefore there is no reason for anger. When you think this way, the other person approaches you saying, don't be angry with me. Because when I think like this, that I'm not better, then what happens? A subtle energy from my heart flows to another person. This energy says, you are also a good person. It tells the other person that he or she is a good person. Despite the fact that we had an argument, the sense is that both are good people. And then conscience begins bothering us. When does conscience gnaw? When you're angry at a person and think, oh, you. Your conscience will gnaw at you. I'm good. You're bad. In such a state, conscience won't bother them, as the negative energy of our false ego flows from us to another person. And what happens? They in turn feel no love towards us either, and there will be no forgiveness. This results in mere diplomacy. We will approach each other with smiles and nice words, but wolves will be sitting in our eyes, and hostility will remain. What kind of life is this? No life at all. Therefore you need to find the real enemy within and say inside, oh, you again created such relationships with everyone, you worthless person. You're always blaming everyone. You need to find the enemy within and tell yourself, stop blaming everything around, be patient. But how to be patient in a state of happiness? What does a person who has stopped looking for an enemy around begin to think? They realize, I must be happy to endure everything. How can I endure if I'm already unhappy? I will only get angry. A happy person is filled with happiness, so it's easy for them to share or lose a bit of that happiness. When a person is in a good mood and someone tells them something bad, they don't get disheartened immediately. They keep smiling for a while. A truly happy person can't be shaken by bad information. They are grounded in inner peace and feel happiness. Everything is good inside them. They may struggle when overwhelmed, but overall they are filled with happiness. So what does someone who wants to maintain good relationships without blaming others start to cultivate in themselves? A search where happiness is located. They embark on a search to discover where happiness is found. And do you know what the first step in this search is? The first step in this search is to realize that the conventional way of life, focused on self-gratification, brings suffering. Society teaches us from birth to grab what is offered. A small child does this, grabbing whatever is given, and people do the same for themselves, and this ultimately leads to suffering. What is this grabbing for oneself? It is when the false ego is stronger than intelligence. People live by these societal rules and laws, and everyone says, this is how it should be done. But a person wants happiness. They say, where are the happy people who do this? Where are they? If I grab for myself, then what happened to you? What happened is unpleasant. This means suffering will start for me. Suffering will start for me immediately. I will suffer. Why? Because there will be no one left to talk to. Everyone will leave. I'll come and see that there's no one in the hall. This means that I'm a nobody. A nobody is when there is no one around. To find happiness, you must give. But it is very difficult to do, because everyone around is only taking. That's the philosophy here. We were born in this place specifically for this purpose. We weren't born here for happiness, but for suffering. People are born for happiness in other places, but we too can be happy if we realize why we are born here. Therefore, the first formula for all of us should be, write it down, My land, my city, my family, and myself are not places for enjoyment, but for learning, overcoming, and discovering. So when someone tells you, my city is the best, don't believe them. This is someone who is only grabbing and looking out for themselves. They say, my country is the best, my people are the best, and so I automatically become the best too. If I'm the best, it means someone else is worse. So the formula is this. This is not a place for enjoyment, it is a place to endure suffering, to understand, to realize, and to achieve happiness. Happiness arises when a person understands that, despite everything they must give, in the situation we find ourselves now, we should think of others, serve them, and bring happiness to everyone. The first realization a person has in life is understanding where happiness comes from. They realize that happiness comes from within, not from outside. This is the first realization. Because our happiness is right here. The Paramatma, the Oversoul, holds the power of happiness. How is happiness obtained? When we give happiness to others, it flows through our nature, through the whole of me. When I do something for another person, happiness flows through me. What law emerges from this? It returns back to us by itself, without us having to ask for it. Otherwise, it would be like saying, I wished you happiness, but you're such a jerk, as if pulling it back to us. It is very hard to understand this. As soon as I say it, you can feel how everything inside you tensed up, wondering what I'm talking about. Should I give? Give everything? I don't want to give everything. I want to take. The inner voice says, at least I can take a little bit. We've been giving all our lives. Do we have to give again now? What is he saying? In fact, this is the power of false ego speaking. And that is why we ended up here. That is why we suffer. How to give? It doesn't mean coming home and giving everything away. You don't need to give everything away. What can we give away? We can give our kindness. Because whether we give or take some material object from someone, nothing will change. Happiness will not increase for a person through a material object. But if we give our kindness, happiness increases immediately. The second realization is that when a person strives for a material object, it is associated with suffering. When I strive to give something spiritual, aspire to reach the spiritual, or wish to bring happiness to everyone, it is associated with joy. Why is this associated with joy? When I strive for the spiritual or give spiritual things, I gain happiness. Why? You give, everyone takes and says, thanks, I'm off. No, because what is happiness? It is a good attitude. Happiness is another person's good attitude towards you. Happiness is trust. What does trust mean? It's a good energy coming to you. When you're filled with joy, your mood is good every day, and nothing spoils it. You wake up in the morning already in a state of joy, because you have a good connection with hundreds of people. You have a good connection with many people, and they support you as a result. So when a person wishes happiness to everyone and desires to do good, they gain the power of trust. This trust makes them happy, and in turn, everyone loves and trusts them. But you need to know how to relate to 3 categories of people. Understanding this will instantly bring happiness. You've already decided to give, but there are 3 categories of people with whom you need to relate to differently. This is profound knowledge. There are no other types of relationships. The first category of people includes those who are in total degradation. The first type of communication with them occurs when they listen to us. We should humbly tell them the truth about how things really are and serve them in this way, but only if they're listening. The second type of relationship is when they refuse to listen. In this case, you should simply wish them happiness in your mind, but maintain a distance to avoid potential problems. What problems? Our happiness is fragile, and if the person to whom we wish happiness doesn't reciprocate or wish happiness, but remains selfish, they may accuse us. They will always be a puppet of our own heart. There's still impurity within our hearts, and when it reaches this person, they may respond with some harsh words. When a person is inclined to react negatively, to get angry, to be rude to us, how should we behave with them? We shouldn't provoke them or enter into conflict with them, because we should always avoid conflict. This is the behavior of a person who aspires to do good. What do? They might say, okay, I will do as you say. Or if the person speaks complete nonsense like, kill that person, then we simply end the relationship with this person altogether. We tell them, if you continue speaking like this, I cannot maintain any relationship with you. The first type of people are those who don't understand the need to give. They only understand taking. If we do good to such people and they start treating us well, we can share knowledge with them. However, what should not be done with such people? If they speak nonsense, don't listen to them. Because remember, a person's mind is always befouled by the information received. Even if you don't like this information, even if the information is unpleasant and bad, just listening to it gradually changes one's perspective. You still gradually change your worldview. Therefore, the most dangerous thing is to listen to someone who speaks nonsense. Try to avoid such communication. The most important thing is not to fall under the influence of people whose lives are governed by greed and selfishness. They say, everything is based on the law of mean selfishness. The more you grab, the more you have. Do not fall under their influence. Once you start listening, your mindset will change. You won't want to wake up early. You won't feel like doing anything good. You'll only want to be in a befouled state. Then happiness will disappear, relationships with loved ones will immediately suffer, and all our happiness will vanish. Therefore, if you treat a person well and they respond kindly, be very careful when becoming friends with them or telling them things. You tell them in any case, you don't take from them, but you tell them, in other words, you give to them. If a person is also used to giving to others, then they will give to you, and you should accept it and reciprocate by giving to them, and they will accept. Don't refuse what they offer. If they're talking about something good, you should listen and also give it to them. This is the nature of the relationship. The third type of relationship is with people who are above us. We should listen to them humbly, without interrupting. We shouldn't criticize them. Even if they have flaws, we should try to accept everything. Thus, there are 3 types of relationships. Did you remember them or not? Can someone name other types of relationships? What else exists? When a person thinks of their own self-interest only, they form a different kind of relationship, one filled with arguments. This type of relationship should be avoided entirely. Another type of relationship involves listening to all kinds of nasty things. Do you know when people enjoy listening to gossip? Do you know when? When their hearts are full of hatred. When a person talks, gossips, discusses everyone, or criticizes, remember, if you listen, it's a test for you. It shows that your heart is no different from theirs. This means that you will be polluted by this force, and eventually misery will come, suffering will follow. When someone listens to gossip, they experience suffering, and this state is called befoulment. After listening to gossip, a person immediately loses optimism. They feel pessimistic and think everything is bad, that there is no joy in life. What defines someone who is in a state of befoulment? What is a befouled state? What indicates a state of pessimism? What is pessimism? When a person says, everything is bad, nothing is good, I can't do anything, I can't cope with anything, I don't have time, and I can't achieve anything, it means that the person is befouled by a negative force. How can we overcome this? Does anyone know? You need to sit down immediately and start wishing happiness for everyone. In 5 minutes, you'll begin to feel optimistic. This is how you get rid of the befoulment. Where does befoulment come from? It stems from not being in tune with time, that is, from irresponsibility. Those who were at the previous lecture know what responsibility and irresponsibility are. When a person aligns with time and does everything on time, it means they are in harmony with time and their body will be energetic and optimistic. Secondly, optimism comes from the right mindset, when a person wants to give and help others, without selfishly keeping everything to themselves. And what about the third source of optimism? There's also the third source, a very interesting one. Does anyone know? The third source of optimism is our past karma. It arises when we have already done this in the past over a long period. Suddenly, despite the unfavorable circumstances, even if we haven't done things right and didn't get up on time, optimism can still come to our heart as a kind of reward from our past. This can happen, but you shouldn't rely on it always. It's like a reward. It's just luck. We did good things in the past, and we should simply think, well, that's fortunate. We shouldn't let ourselves be guided by this kind of optimism. These are 3 attitudes towards these different types of optimism. Optimism comes from other people, when we live for others and do things for them. What should our approach be? We should say, I'm doing the right thing, everything is going well. This should be our attitude towards this type of optimism. If optimism arises from doing things on time, how should we relate to it? I do everything on time and optimism follows. How should we feel about this kind of optimism? Don't make promises. Continue doing things on time, but don't make promises. That is, have a slightly cautious attitude. The third type of optimism comes from our past, from our good deeds. What should we say to such optimism? I shouldn't rely on it. For example, I got up late, but due to past actions, when I got up on time for many years, I still woke up feeling joyful. I might think, see, I can get up late, and still everything is fine. We shouldn't be guided by such optimism that arises from a favorable fate, but involves acting incorrectly. We should be cautious about it. Did you remember everything I have just told you? In this way, we should gradually change our lives. So what is the key to success? Who will be successful? Who knows? Who can win? Who can recover and find happiness? Who knows? Only one category of people can do this. It's a secret. Who knows? How can this be achieved? That's all correct, but those people will not succeed. So who will succeed? That's good too, but success will last for a short time, only until happiness is blocked. That won't last long either. Strength fades. So who will succeed? You don't know because it's a secret. I told you it's a secret. The person who will succeed is the one who remains determined to communicate with people who have this power. Those who strive for positive communication will succeed because communication transforms a person. Only communication. There is positive communication when we actively choose our connections. Then there is negative or passive communication, when a person doesn't choose their connections but simply goes along with whatever communication is available. Passive communication causes suffering because it arises from our past actions. And since we were born here, it means we had nothing particularly good in the past, unequivocally, because as you have already written it down, earth is not a place for enjoyment or pleasure. You should remember this. Therefore, we need to find where knowledgeable people are. We must seek them out and try to communicate with them. The one who does this attains happiness. And what prevents us from doing this? What prevents us is the lack of understanding of time. When a person doesn't do everything on time, problems accumulate and they say, I don't have time to go to lectures, I need to work, I can't manage this or that, I don't have time for anything. I need to go, I need to work, I need to do everything. There is no time. They say, there is no time. This means that time has blocked them. It said, you're not going anywhere. So, what should a person learn? They should learn to communicate as they want. It's their only reward. A person works tirelessly all their life, like a donkey chasing a carrot that never gets closer, even in their old age. You know, they hang a carrot in front of a donkey. The donkey runs, wants to eat it, and thus turns the well from which water comes out. There are such donkeys in India. In the scriptures, there's an example that a person runs like a donkey after the carrot that they themselves hung in front of their nose. They say, once I finish school and start working, life will be easier. Once I retire, life will get easier. Once I raise my children, it will be easier. I raised my children, so once I do this or that, it will be easier. Then suddenly they die. That is, they run after the carrot that hangs in front of their nose and is always out of reach. How should a person live? They should say, whatever the reward for my work is, I take it now. I worked, so I should get good communication. Every day, I should get good communication, at least an hour a day. If not with people, then at least by reading a spiritual book that speaks the truth. You should only read this. Why? Why should you only read this? To sharpen your intelligence. Keep sharpening and sharpening it, so that in a difficult moment, it guides you to do the right thing without fail. It said, don't eat cake. In the evening, they brought a cake. The doctor said, don't eat cake at night. This is the cause of your suffering. Then they will look, and you will be fat. And intelligence says, don't eat cake. But the mind is already influenced by this force. Your senses have already soaked this cake. And the false ego said, at least one small piece. It's your favorite dish, your most loved treat. At least one small piece, please. Today is such an unusual day. Today is Friday, please. Tomorrow's already a day off, so it's okay. Just a little, nothing will change. Just eat a little bit and that's it. Go to sleep. One small piece won't make you fat. You won't get fat from one small piece. If intelligence is not strong, it doesn't know all the mind's tricks. When intelligence is weak, what does it say? It says, well, okay, a small piece is fine. Go ahead, eat it, okay. But don't eat more, or you'll gain weight. And when does it all fall apart? When a person is already eating this small piece, the senses are filled with joy, and everything is filled with happiness coming from the cake. At this point, the mind says, I told you it was good. And then your intelligence is defeated. The mind says, go ahead, cut another piece. A bigger one already, and then another piece and another. Have you watched Winnie the Pooh? And then he couldn't get through the door anymore. The hole got smaller. This is how it happens. What happens when a person doesn't sharpen their intelligence? What happens is that they can't cope with their feelings, they can't cope with their mind, and suffering arises. Then they start getting sick. As a result, they get fat, and no one likes them anymore. This is suffering, right? Therefore, those who eat cake at night will gain weight. The knowledge has been received. Now the work begins. To learn more on the subject of health and healing of the body, please make sure to read my health guide, available for download on my YouTube channel or on my Instagram page. Thank you very much, and see you soon.